One of the problems with late stage capitalism is that people ultimately can't imagine a life outside of the system. And that is what people refer to as capitalist realism. Capitalist realism is essentially the idea that the current system of capitalism that we live in is the only system that works and that there's ultimately no alternative to capitalism. Many young people, especially people like myself, like millennials, that grew up the within this capitalistic system, it's hard for people to imagine what life could possibly be like outside of capitalism. However, as we begin to realize the gravity of the climate crisis, it then presents us with a new opportunity to restructure society in a way that is beneficial to all people, the environment, and ultimately the planet. And so then it helps us to understand that there ultimately could be a system outside of capitalism after we begin to mitigate the effects of climate change. This ability to then reimagine the way that society works and functions after we mitigate the effects of climate change is something that I call capitalistic surrealism. Let's first of all start by defining what surrealism actually is. Surrealism is a 20th century avant garde art movement that began in the 1920s, best known for its aim to unlock the power of the unconscious mind. It sought to challenge rationality, logic, conventional norms, and using dream imagery, unexpected juxtapositions, and fantastical scenes to explore deeper psychological realities. So the idea is that within capitalistic surrealism is that we have to then begin to imagine what the world could look like living within the Anthropocene. And there are already countries that are already living in the future or having a more modern sort of perspective to living within the Anthropocene, like Singapore, for example. And so I think that that is ultimately the trajectory that we as a people, as a collective, need to be going in and heading in. The good news is that there ultimately is life after late stage capitalism, that there ultimately, we have the opportunity to have cleaner meat, we have the opportunity to address the biodiversity issue and tackle and kind of slow down the sixth mass extinction that's happening, and also mitigate the effects of climate change with the Green Leap Forward. Within our current system of capitalism, we have this top-down approach to how we view the way that society works. So we have this employer-employee sort of paradigm, and within this new era of understanding how we could restructure society, it would function more as a colonial system. Colonial in an with an ecological sense, like how beehives work. Ultimately, we would ultimately all be working for the greater good of society and for the benefit of all people. That within this, in this new era of consciousness, that we are beginning to be challenged with the idea of what does it mean to ultimately be human? What does it mean to work more collaboratively and work more as an ecosystem? And those sort of questions are what kind of arise within the conversations of capitalistic surrealism. I also think that it's urgent to begin to help us, especially as the younger generation, to begin to elevate our consciousness to living within the Anthropocene so that way we can begin to imagine a future for ourselves. Because the older generations are going to begin to retire soon, and a lot of Gen Zers and Gen Alpha, we're already straddled with so much debt and we can't afford houses and things like that because the economy is so bad. So we can ultimately fix it. So there is ultimately life after late stage capitalism. We need to redistribute the wealth, mitigate the effects of climate change, and then advance technology because, like I mentioned earlier in earlier videos, that technology is going to advance really, really fast, that there's an exponential growth component to technology, and then we can begin to focus on modernizing our society, making it work for everyone.